I'm McKinney Smith. After going through a divorce, my sister passing away, experiencing narcissistic abuse, and some significant health scares, I realized through sharing my story that I wasn't alone in my suffering. Suffering, subjective distress generated by the experience of being out of balance. In a deep dive to holistically heal mind, body, and soul is where I discovered peace, clarity, and connection. It is impossible to be truly wise without some real life hardship, and we cannot develop post-traumatic wisdom without making it through, and most importantly, through it together. Social connection builds resilience, and resilience helps create post-traumatic wisdom, and that wisdom leads to hope. Hope for you and others witnessing and participating in your healing, and hope for your community. A healthy community is a healing community, and a healing community is full of hope because it has seen its own people weather, survive, and thrive. Thank you for joining us on the H.E.A.L podcast, H.E.A.L. Honor, Elevate, and Love Her podcast. Formerly known as the Walk My Stilettos podcast, the top 1.5% most popular show globally, where we have conversations with extraordinary women on their journey towards wholeness and harmony. And since you're already here, you may as well subscribe. As a certified mindset coach guiding women towards peace, clarity, and connection within, supporting the direction of the system toward wholeness, my goal here is to help you thrive. Amberly Lago is a peak performance coach, TEDx speaker, podcaster, and a leading expert in the field of resilience transformation. She's the best-selling author of True Grit and Grace, Unstoppable Life Mastermind. Through her book, coaching methods, and masterminds, she's curated unique tools to teach others how to tap into their superpower of resilience and elevate their lives and businesses. She builds grit, inspires hope, fuels passion, and uncovers your superpower of resilience. Amberly has most recently been featured on NBC's The Today Show, The Doctors, Hallmark, and featured magazines such as Shape, Fit Pregnancy, Yahoo, Health Magazine, and much, much more. Please welcome to the show, Amberly Lago.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm so excited that we have finally been able to connect. It's been a while, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. And I believe nothing happens before time. I believe this is definitely perfect timing. Sometimes we have our mind set on things happening within a certain time, but I've learned to let go of that and accept when the time is right. So I believe that this is the perfect time. So thank you so much, Amberly, for not only agreeing to have this conversation and be on the podcast, but I'm already thankful, and I know in advance that you are going to share so many gems and wisdom from your story. So thank you.
Thank you.
So before we get to, where you are presently, I love to a little bit of your backstory. I feel like, we're all adults walking around with our childhood wounds and childhood traumas. So I love to understand who you were when you were a child. Like, what did you want to be when you were a little girl? What type of teenager were you?
Oh, and what a great question, because I feel like so many wounds, so many things that we go through, some, challenges or traumas that we go through. And we might even think, oh, I've healed that. I'm over that. I'm past that. Done with that.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, something comes along and you are triggered and you're like, whoa, what the heck? Where did that come from? And I'll never forget when I was, I must have been 25 years old. I went into my therapist and I was talking to her about this relationship that I was in, and I was there to talk about the relationship. And then she looks at me and she goes, "Were you sexually abused?" And I said, yeah, how'd you know? And she goes, oh, all the signs are there. Well, what have you done to heal? I said, oh, I've healed it. I've done the work. I've read books. I'm past that. That's not why I'm here. She goes, I don't think you have worked on that like you should. And she gave me a bunch of books to read, and then I dove into that a little bit more. But as a kid, it's so funny. My mom's best friend just sent her a picture of me. She texted me a picture, just sent me this picture. And I just look pathetic. I mean, I wrote my mom and I said, my goodness, bless my heart. I was just the ugliest little thing you ever saw. I was such a tomboy. I was. Oh my goodness. And I told my mom, I was like, oh my goodness, I remember this moment. I was horrified. You put me in this pageant. I didn't even like wearing dresses. I was such a tomboy, and I'm in a pink taffeta ruffledy dress, and I've got these big buck teeth and my hair's frizzy, and I just look so uncomfortable in this picture. And so anyway, my mom, I think, put me in dance because it was kind of the girly thing to do, because I was happy outside making mud pies, playing with the boys, riding dirt bikes. I mean, I was really a tomboy. But I'm so grateful to her for putting me in dance, because it became my outlet. It became my place where I could build upon my joy, especially when I was dealing with a lot of pain. My parents got divorced when I was 8 years old, and shortly after, I mean, it felt like my parents just got divorced, and my mom said, and by the way, this is going to be your new stepdad. And he sexually abused me, and that's something that I couldn't speak of, or at one point, I never imagined I would be able to talk about it. But through a lot of therapy, a lot of tears, a lot of healing work, I can talk about it. And it wasn't until I wrote my book and I wrote about it that I was like, wow, I thought I dealt with this, but there's something about writing, like pen to paper, that is so cathartic. But as a child, I remember being so much in pain and shame and anger. And what I did was I decided to do something that made me feel good. And that's what I do to this day. And so I got into athletics. I got into track. I ran, and I feel like the shame and the anger almost fueled my running, and I got first place, and then I set a record in the state of Texas for running the fastest mile, and I got straight A's. I became an honor roll student. I was voted Miss Greenville High School class favorite. Like anything that I could do to improve myself and to make me feel better, I did. And I loved dance. And I remember going to a convention in Dallas, because I grew up in this small town. And that was also when MTV came out, and they had these videos that would play on Friday nights. And I thought, you mean you can get paid to dance? I mean, I could get paid to do what I love? Well, then heck, I'm doing that. And so I worked 4 jobs until I saved up enough money, which was $1,200. And as soon as I graduated from high school, I packed up my little Suzuki Samurai, and I headed from Texas to California I think ignorance is bliss. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I had so many people tell me, you're never going to make it. Who do you think you are? I mean, I remember my stepmom, the last thing she said to me is, I think you're making a big mistake. And I was like, I am out of this small town. I am going to go follow my dreams, and I'm going to make something of myself. Well, I think I was pushed, by pain. I was like, I am not staying this place that's unsafe. And I was pulled by my passion. And then when I got out here, I was like, I'm going to do whatever it takes. I didn't have parents that were like, let me go set you up in a nice apartment. let me go out there with you. It was like, if I wanted to make it, I knew I was going to have to do it. So right away, within the first 2 weeks that I got to California, I had 4 jobs.
Wow.
And a month later, I was in my first music video dancing with MC Hammer. And so
Wow.
yeah, can you believe that? And so all the people that were like, you'll never make it, suddenly they were like, wow, yeah, that's my friend. I knew she was going to make it someday. She's in an MC Hammer video. I know her. You know what I mean? And so, it was 31 years that I lived in California. We just moved back 10 months ago. We just moved back to Texas and rented a house and we're seeing how it feels to live out here. And we actually just moved into our house that we just bought last week. And so there's so many feels. And I'll tell you one more quick story.
Mm-hmm.
I just had a chance to sit down and be still for the first time, like a few days ago. And I sat in my little hammock. It's this little single hammock chair outside. And I just got overwhelmed with gratitude. And I burst into tears because I was a single mom for years and I struggled. And I moved into, my little tiny 1-bedroom apartment, and all I had was a baby crib and a little table. And I keep that little table as a reminder of how far I've come. And I looked at this house that we bought and I thought, dang it, I look at what your hard work puts you where your blessings can find you. Because, it wasn't that long ago that I was a single mom. And then I started my business in the fitness industry and I built my life back up again. And then 12 years ago, it was all taken away, like the rug was ripped out from underneath me, and I lost it all. And we had $2.9 million worth of medical expenses and a lien on our house. And so to be able to sit and look at what we've been able to rebuild, I was just filled with gratitude. So for anybody listening, I just want to say, if you hold that vision for yourself and you work every day towards that vision, God always has bigger plans. And if we just trust the process and put in the work every day, I believe those big dreams and that big vision you have for yourself is possible. I believe anything is possible.
Absolutely. I agree with you 1,000%. Before we even started recording and you were talking, I was like, I can hear that Texas accent, but I was going to ask you if that's where you were from. And then you mentioned it just now. I love the accent. I have a few friends that are out there. But you spoke to so many points that I want to touch on and unpack. So when you first started talking and you were talking about the therapist and how first, I want to say, I'm sorry you had to experience being sexually abused and you went through that. And I can't imagine, what that was like for you. And then having a therapist basically tell you, like, you haven't quite dealt with that. I did a story today on Instagram. And as you were talking, I was like, this is exactly what I was talking about in my story, how, sometimes we do the work to heal. And we think that we've healed from that thing, and then a trigger comes up. And the trigger is not necessarily that we haven't healed or done the work. It's just we're now ready to do the deeper work. So, triggers can come at any point. And, in my story, I was just saying to people, like, just because you've had a trigger doesn't mean that you haven't done the work. It just means that it's time and you're prepared to go even deeper. So when you talked about the shame and anger and all the other things that you experienced from the time you were younger till, being a single mom, it made me think about our paradigms, our habitual way of thinking. Every one of us is born into a particular set of circumstances, and our values are defined by that. And, what we experience, we're conditioned by the environments that we grow up in and the values that our parents have. And from me following you on Instagram for so long, you motivate me. And I was just telling you this before we started recording. Where do you feel that your conditionings or your paradigms come from? Were you born into, hardship or luxury? Were your parents the type that had the type of resilience that you have? Like, where did that come from?
Oh, well, thank you. Well, you know what? I'm so grateful that, I've got a loving, wonderful mom and dad, and they did the best they could, with the tools that they had. And my mom she worked so hard a lot of time. Most of the time she worked two jobs just to keep a roof over her head and food on the table. And my dad worked really hard as well. He was an entrepreneur, and I just remember him being so stressed a lot of times. And I remember my mom being so exhausted that she would like fall asleep on the sofa while folding
Mm-hmm.
laundry most of the time, or,
Mm-hmm.
um, my mom has overcome so much from, divorce. My little brother, was born and had a brain injury, and he's been in a wheelchair his whole life. And, then dealing with, she got remarried to my stepfather, who turned out to be just this horrible man. And then she got divorced again. And then she has my little brother, who is on death row in Texas, who
Wow.
got into drugs and alcohol and led him down a really horrible path. And so she's definitely resilient. And we grew up going to church. And so I knew about God, and I knew about the Bible, but that's not really where I felt my spiritual connection. And this might sound kind of crazy, but where I felt closest to God, and I still do, is outside in nature. And
Mm-hmm.
where I started to develop a relationship with God was running track. And I would be on the track, and that would be the time that I would just have conversations with God.
Mm-hmm.
And my coach was one of my biggest mentors, and my dance teacher was a huge mentor. My coach is, I think, who really taught. My grandmother taught me grit and how to be tough. I mean, she is 95, 95.
Wow.
Gosh, almost
Wow.
no, 6. And she still lives in this huge 2-story house on a pecan grove, goes up and down those stairs, picks all the pecans, makes, Thanksgiving dinner for us. She's amazing. So she's tough. She doesn't complain. She focuses on what's really important. And so she is like who I strive to be. Like I flatter myself to think I'm a little bit like her. Um, she's amazing, and my mom is so strong, but I really think that a lot of what taught me also to be really emotionally tough and resilient, I really think when I think about that is being an athlete and being a dancer. I mean, my dance teacher didn't care if my feet were bleeding in my point shoes. She's like,
Mm-hmm.
look, are you going to do that? Do you want this bad enough? If you don't, your understudy will take over for you. So it was pretty much like, suck it up, buttercup,
Mm-hmm.
get, get back up on your feet and keep going. And, my track coach, it would be running, it would be 100 degrees and 100% humidity. And you would run so hard that you'd have to throw up. And she could see when I'd start to throw up, and she'd be like, off the track to throw up and then keep running.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I was taught, like, if you wanted to win, you had to push through. You had to push further than you thought you could go. But it wasn't until I had a horrific motorcycle accident, and I was so busy sucking up the pain and pushing through the pain and working hard to try to get better, and I wasn't getting better, and the pain seemed to be getting worse, that I thought, wait a minute, there's a time when, yes, we absolutely need to push through, but there's also a time that we need to give ourselves grace. And
Mm-hmm.
that has been what I really had to learn, was to stop and go, well, wait a minute. what is this pain trying to teach me? Or like you said earlier, that trigger, what is this trigger trying to teach me? So now when I go through something, if it's hard or if it's challenging or if I get triggered, I'm like, what is it that I need to learn? How
Mm-hmm.
do I grow? What can I learn from this? And it's not that I want to stay there and get stuck in it and, have a pity party forever. But, look, last night I had a total like meltdown, crying like ugly cry. Okay. And my
Wow.
husband was out like, what the heck? He does not, cause I'm pretty tough. And actually for a long time, from the time I was probably 10 years old until I was 25 or 26, I never cried. And
Oh,
that was
wow.
because my stepdad would try to break me down and break me down. And the minute I would cry, he would laugh at me and make fun of me and say, see, I knew I could break you down. I knew I could destroy you.
Oh,
So I
wow.
thought against that is I just will not cry. Well, that's not healthy. So
Mm-hmm.
now I'm all for when you need to cry, when you need to let it out, whatever you need to heal so you can process. And I think that in order to heal, we have to feel. So we're
Yeah.
not, sitting there dealing with it, but we're really healing it.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Mhm.
Totally agree. You know, I feel like giving ourselves grace as women wasn't something that we were taught. And especially for women like yourself and, women like me that we were raised to be tough, to suck it up. We weren't given the space to express our feelings, to feel the feels. And our feelings are data. It lets us know what's going on. And if we don't process it, then it explodes and comes out somewhere, or internally, we start to feel the effects of it in our body physically. So what does giving yourself grace look like to you?
Oh, well, like for me, I completely agree. Like I was not, raised where it was okay to feel. I mean, we had sayings where when I grew up, like, suck it up, buttercup, hide your
Hmm.
crazy, be a lady, and,
Wow.
and just act like everything's okay, and it was like, that's how I was raised, and it wasn't okay to express. And I think that giving yourself grace to me, well, often for me, because I live with a nerve disease called complex regional pain syndrome, I was diagnosed with as a result of my accident and having surgeries, and it's this incurable nerve disease. So they say it's incurable. I have tried about every kind of treatment known to mankind. That's why one of the reasons we had so many medical expenses.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just trying to push through, push through, push through. And what I learned the hard way, and I mean, this is a lesson I just learned like in the past few years because I was pushing and pushing to the point where I was ending up in the emergency room. And a few years ago, I was in the emergency room 6 times in 1 year. And the ER doctor comes and looks at me and says, you can't keep coming back here. What is
Mm-hmm.
going on? You've got to take care of yourself. And that still didn't quite hit me. It's like I need to be hit over the head with a hammer or something, I guess. I don't know. I guess I'm hard headed, but it wasn't until I was actually passing a kidney stone. I had no idea that's what was happening, but my thought was, oh wow, so this nerve disease gives me a lot of pain in my leg. My back hurt from passing the kidney stone so bad that my thought was, oh, well, this is great. My back hurts so bad that my leg doesn't hurt and I can walk without a limp. Like always looking to the bright side. Look, I can walk with a limp. And later, the next day, I started feeling really sick. I mean, sicker than I had ever felt before. And I told my husband, I said, I think I need to go to the doctor. So I was going to go into the doctor, and I had barely enough energy. It was like all the energy I had to get in the shower. I got out of the shower and I had to lay down before I could even have enough energy to put my clothes on. And all of a sudden I started convulsing, and I yelled for my husband, and I was like, "What's wrong with me? I can't." My whole body was shaking, like uncontrollably shaking. And he put his hands down on me to try to get me to stop shaking. And he called one of our friends that's a doctor, and he said, "Oh my gosh, I don't know what's going on with her. I was going to take her to the doctor. Do you think she has a fever?" What? He said, "No, I think she's septic." He said, "Forget the doctor. You need to take her to the ER right now." Took me to the ER. Long story short, I went in. I said, "Hey, yeah, I'm really sick." I said, "I think I might have a kidney infection. My back hurts." Well, I was septic. And what
Wow.
really got me was they said, "We've got to admit you into ICU." And I said, "Well, I don't want to go to ICU. I won't be able to see my kids." And I said, "If we don't get you into ICU, you're going to die. We got to get you
Wow.
in there now." So it was the doctor telling me the next day, it was kind of a blur. I was in ICU for 3 days. Said if you would have waited one more day, you would have been dead.
Wow.
That scared me more than anything ever. And I thought, you know what? We're actually pretty fragile. Like, we have to listen to our body. And so to
Mm-hmm.
me, giving myself grace means that if my body is yelling at me that there is pain, or I have a fever, or my leg is screaming at me, or I am all of a sudden, I push myself sometimes to the point where I will be so exhausted I throw up.
Wow.
That's my body sending me messages like, it's time to slow down. You need to
Mm-hmm.
take a rest. So giving myself grace means being kind and giving myself kindness like I would to my own kids, or to my best friend, or to my husband. Why do I push myself? Like, I think about it. If my daughter told me, "Mom, my ankle hurts so bad, I'm having a hard time walking," would I tell her, "Well, you better keep walking on it"? No, I would give her an
Mm-hmm.
ice pack, and I would prop her leg up, and I would love on her.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't do the same for me, you know? So I think that I'm still learning. I'm not always good at it. I think because for so long, I was conditioned for so long to push, to push, to push. And if I didn't, I wouldn't succeed, or I wouldn't be able to keep a roof over my head, or I wouldn't, you know what I mean, or I wouldn't finish
Mm-hmm.
the race, and I've just learned that sometimes it's not worth it. Our health is the most important thing, because without our health, we can't enjoy
Mm-hmm.
anything.
Yeah. Agreed. Like I feel like many of us, including myself, have a hard time giving ourselves as much grace as we give other people. It's something that we need to practice, like you said, on a regular basis, because the example that you gave with your daughter, if she hurt her foot, like there's so many examples that we get on a daily of where we give other people the most amount of grace. But then for ourselves, we don't do that same thing. We are, all our own worst critic. I was listening to how you described the picture of yourself that your mother sent you, earlier. And I thought we are definitely our own worst critic. Like the things that, we would say about ourselves, we wouldn't want anyone else to say to us, or we wouldn't say that about someone else. Um,
Oh
you know,
yeah, and I remember when my TED Talk came out. It took me 3 days before I could watch it, because I knew I didn't want to be so hard on myself, and I didn't want to pick myself apart. So I
mhm,
waited 3 days, and I was like, "Amberly, be kind to yourself." I've learned to talk to myself instead of listen to myself, because if I listen, my inner critic will come up and it'll just like tear me apart, telling me
mhm,
I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not whatever it is enough. And it's like, as long as you know you're doing your best, you did your absolute best, then that's enough.
mhm. Agreed. I agree.
Mhm.
You've been through many traumatic events from, being sexually abused to, the car accident your motorcycle accident where, you had 34 surgeries to save your leg from amputation. I think you said in your TED Talk, they gave you a 1% chance of being able to use your leg again. Then you had the diagnosis with it's dubbed the suicide disease, your chronic pain disease. Like,
Yeah.
I can't even imagine what your emotional and psychological health has had to endure. So, how do you work through that to be the resilient woman that you are today?
Well, thank you. I tell you what, it takes a lot of work. I mean, I say that because I don't think that or I haven't anyway, I don't ever feel like we get to a place where we're like, and I have arrived. I am resilient and unstoppable and things are good. It's like, I just feel like it took me down. I got through this, horrific accident and I had a 1% chance of saving my leg from amputation and then got through all these surgeries. And what the hardest part was being diagnosed with a nerve disease and learning that they're like, you will always be in pain. Like every day you're going to hurt. Like there are treatments. There's nothing we can do. This is a baffling disease. So you're going to have pain. So you need to just go get back in your wheelchair. But that wasn't the vision that I had for myself. And so I kept trying all these things. And when it wasn't working is when I started doing really terrible things like drinking every day to try to cope with the pain. And I felt like I only really had one tool or a couple of tools that I used. I used to pray and I would run. And I would run, and that was my drug of choice. Like, that's what would make me feel better. And now I couldn't run, and I was stuck in this hospital bed, and I was just sitting with all these emotions. And it wasn't until I took a really good, hard look at my life. And I think that is the first real truth, like transformational journey is taken. That first step is to look at what's going on in your life and an acceptance for what your circumstances are, for who you are, and for the choices that you're making. And I was not making good choices. And it wasn't until I admitted, oh my gosh, and I was kind of thinking, how did a good girl like me, who was never a partier, never, a drinker, I was an athlete sponsored by Nike, end up drinking wine every day to cope with the pain. And I was like, I think I got a problem. And admitting that to myself was really scary. Admitting it to my husband, even scarier. And then he was like, oh, no, I don't think you have a problem. Anybody would be drinking if they had to deal with as much pain. But the thing is, I knew deep down that I had a problem and I needed help. And so I think that when we really get quiet and we really start asking ourselves questions and we really start taking a look at the actions that we're taking, we can go, okay, how's that working for you? Is that helping you or is that hurting you? Because everything that we do is either helping us or hurting us.
Yeah.
And so that's when I just really started to change my life, was when I stopped drinking. I started really, went to therapy, started diving into self-development. And to this day, I really believe that if I don't stick to and I think we have to find what morning ritual or what routines work for us. But I know for me, it is so imperative to have quiet time in the morning so I can focus on my intentions. I can pray. I can journal what I'm grateful for, because I wake up and I'm not always the most positive person. I wake up, I'm in pain, and I can start going, oh, life's hard. This sucks. I can't hardly walk today. But instead, I shift that with gratitude. And so I think that if the minute you're feeling sad or discouraged or you're getting caught up in comparison, if you can just start to think of one thing that you're grateful for, it's the quickest and easiest way to feel better about your situation. And moving my body. So I think it's really important to have what your non-negotiables are that you to live a better life, to be a better person, a better mom, a better sister, a better daughter, a better leader, and stick to those things. And for me, it's definitely quiet time. It's daily readings. I have a group of ladies that they're my accountability partners. And every day we now do it on an app, and we text 10 things, or we write down in this journal 10 things that we're grateful for, and we just shoot each other that text. And it's one thing to, feel grateful. It's another thing to write it, and it's another thing to share it.
Yes.
And it's another thing to feel what somebody else is grateful for, because that will sure change your day as well. And so I think that for me, by having these things that I do daily, and also making sure like that when I first get up in the morning, I want to grab my phone. I want to check out Instagram. I even want to get on TikTok, if we're being honest here. But I do not allow myself to pick up my phone unless I have first set the tone for the day. And then so many times that I don't feel like working out, that I'm not motivated, and I don't depend on motivation. I depend on healthy habits of what I call smart feet, of like, I know I'm going to get up, I'm going to put on my workout clothes, and at some point in the day, hopefully it's first thing in the morning. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes I have early calls, but I know that if I move my body, it will move my mood. And then getting out in nature and connecting to God, just getting grounded, being in contact with other people and surrounding yourself with people who are positive and they believe in you and they're doing big things and they're talking about their big dreams and big visions and they're excited for life. I think all of those things really help me to be more mentally and emotionally resilient. And then I go to therapy, and I still go to meetings for recovery. I have a group of ladies that I put together. I call us the Legendary Ladies, and we're a group of entrepreneurs. And it also helps to be of service. And, that's one thing that really saved me mentally in the hospital.
Wow.
Was being grateful, and I could feel instantly how that would shift my perspective. But being of service, it got me out of any kind of self-pity, and it made me feel like I had a purpose. Even when I was stuck in a hospital bed, I could make phone calls, I could give exercise advice. Shoot, I had the nurses, when they found out I was a fitness trainer, they were like, well, what exercise tips would you recommend for me? And so a lot of people are like, well, how could you be of service when, or how can I be of service when my life is so hard right now? There's always somebody out there that's going through something almost identical to what you're going through. And if we share our joy, it multiplies. And if we share our pain, it divides it.
I love that. I love that. That is going to be your quotable from this episode.
Oh, good.
I love that. I was listening to everything that you were listing in terms of, how you work through being resilient, and all of them, like you probably totally did this unconsciously, but they fall within the 5 pillars of resilience. And I think right now in this time, I know a lot of people don't even like the word resilient. I'm a huge fan of the word resilient, and it just really depends on what it means to you. But a rough definition is the capacity to recover from difficulty or toughness. But the 5 pillars of resilience are self-awareness, mindfulness, self-care, positive relationships, and purpose. So when you talked about so many things, but Um, you know, the part about gratitude. People don't realize when you are actively practicing gratitude, because you made a strong point about writing it down and then also sharing it, but it affects your mood and your vibration that you're on. You could be in a really bad mood, and I explain this simply where your feelings are just labels for the vibration that you're on. So if you're in a bad mood and you actively take the time to have a positive feeling about something, that lifts your vibration. So it lifts your mood. It changes your mood. You talked about moving your body. Um, Emotions are energy in motion. When you talked about your community of women that you share things with, those are your positive relationships. You talked about being of service. That's, you walking in your purpose. Like, I think unconsciously, you have the 5 pillars of resilience in place in your life. So it totally makes sense why I view you as the resilient woman that you are.
Oh, well, thank you. It's so interesting because I actually didn't know like the um, 5 pillars of resilience in that way, but I had, when I did my TED talk, I remember they asked me, they said, you have to share the most important message of your life. And I was like, well, I think the most important message for me is like how I continue to get through some really tough times. And it all came about because my husband told me I needed to pace myself. And I was like, I am pacing myself. And I wrote down on a little napkin, I was like, these are the things that I do every day so I can continue to thrive. And I wrote down the word pace at first, and then I added the R and called it pacer. And it stands for perspective, acceptance, community, endurance, and rest. And so as you were talking, I was like, yeah, all those things that I kind of listed in there, it's like it's all very similar but a little different. But
Mhm.
but it's very similar.
I love your pacer method. Like I said, I watched your TED talk and thought you had so many amazing points within that entire talk. So anyone who's listening needs to definitely go and watch your TED talk. I know you felt that you were going to be overcritical of yourself when you watched it. I watched it and was totally inspired. So,
Well, thank you. Thank you. Oh my goodness. So that was my first talk, like the first time I'd ever stood on a stage in front of 2,500 people and given a talk.
wow.
And yeah. So I was like, and I was the only person there that didn't have a PhD. And I'll share this with your audience because maybe it can help somebody else that maybe, I think sometimes it's easy to kind of look and get caught up in comparison. And we all know it's the thief of joy. But I
Hmm.
remember as they rolled the website and they had all the speakers that were going to be at this TEDx Berkeley. All these people had these big initials after their name. And, I was like, oh gosh, I'm the only one that doesn't have a PhD. Shoot, I don't even have a college education. Maybe they got the wrong girl. Maybe I shouldn't be up there. I started like the self-doubt started creeping in. And so
Hmm.
the next call I had with the curator, I said, hey, I'm not trying to like promote my book or anything, but is there any way after my name we could just put that I'm the author or something, because I'm the only person that doesn't have anything after their name? And she goes, oh my goodness, are you feeling self-conscious about it? And I said, well, yeah, I'm the only one that doesn't have a PhD. And she said, you know what? You've got a PhD in heart, and that's
Mm.
why I want you on our stage. And that just shifted everything for me. I was like, yeah, I got a PhD in heart. So
I love that. Perspective is everything.
it just shifted everything, and so I was really grateful that she said that. It really changed things for me. And then also I think anytime I'm about to do something that's scary, I always think about, well, wait a minute. I focus on why I even started and why I'm sharing the message. And it's not about me. It's about the people I'm serving, you know?
Yeah.
And so anytime I start to get nervous or in my head, I'm like, wait a minute. No, I need to get out of my head, stay in my heart, and remember my why. And I didn't start for me. I did this so I could give hope and inspiration to others.
I love it. I love it. So before we go to the final segment of the show, I want you to tell people where they can stay connected with you online so they can learn more about you and from you.
Oh, well, yeah, thank you. You can find my podcast, my book, my mastermind, all the upcoming events that are going on at amberlylago.com. And Instagram is, and all my social media handles are up there as well. Instagram is where I probably hang out the most. It's Amberly Lago Motivation. And yeah, reach out and let me know you heard this interview. So I always like to, connect with people. That's the best part of the whole journey, is just being able to connect with others. So yeah, reach out to me anytime.
Awesome. I will have all of your links where they can connect with you in the detailed section of the episode so they don't have to search too far.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. So it's time for the final segment of the show. It's more like a rapid fire where you share rapid wisdom with the women that are listening to honor, elevate, and love herself on her journey to wholeness and harmony. Let me know when you're ready and I'll start shooting the questions.
Let's do it. And I love the name of your podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So let's start with, name a book that has changed or greatly impacted your life.
I would say one of my favorites is The Four Agreements.
Okay. When was the last time you apologized to someone?
This morning.
Okay. What are...
My husband, by the way.
He's lucky to have you.
Thank you. I need to tell him that.
I will.
But you know what? Just to be clear, he apologized too, so it's all good. And he was like, I really like when we make up like this. Let's get in another argument. Like, no, I do not like getting in arguments at all. And no.
They like the making up part. That's what they like.
Yes. I'm like, no.
All right. What have you learned in the past 12 months?
What have I learned? Oh my gosh, so much. Okay. So 5 years ago, I didn't even own a computer. And so for me, learning technology, I hand wrote 90% of my book on a notepad and then bought a laptop, typed it up. And so in the last 12 months, I've learned even more about technology. Yesterday, I just posted a new TikTok and I was like, oh, I think I'm kind of learning how to do these TikTok videos a little bit. And so I'm learning so much, but that's like the technical side. But I feel like I'm learning every day how to be a better communicator, how to be a better leader for my team, how to be a better friend. And so I love learning and growing. It's not always easy, and sometimes it's so frustrating. But I hope to always continue to learn. And so I like being in rooms with people that are a lot further along than me. And so I've got some big events coming up where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm sharing the stage with Ed Milet at one event, then Jamie Kern Lima at another event. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to learn a lot at this event, So yeah, I'm always learning so much every day.
Love it. Okay. When you feel overwhelmed, unfocused, or uninspired, what do you do?
Go to the gym.
Love
I
it.
work out, go to the gym, or if I don't have time for that, going to the gym and actually like listening to fun music and moving my body. like today I was in between calls and I was actually feeling just like almost like an emotional hangover, just exhausted. I mean, moving takes, it was so hard to move. Like this move we did, because it wasn't just moving all of our stuff that we forgot we had so much stuff because we had stuff in storage, but moving my office and so many things going on, that I just went outside in my backyard and just kind of decompressed. I soaked up some sun and just unplugged from devices. And I only had like 10 minutes, but that recharged me. And I also think that, just turning on some music and dancing around.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you
Mm-hmm.
a funny story really quick. So maybe I'm just telling you and your listeners that, so I dance around because it brings me joy. And I was getting ready. I was doing this virtual event and I had my camera off, and my friend texted me, and I am in my office dancing around like kind of a crazy person, actually. Like I don't like the word crazy, but that's my nickname that my husband calls me. I don't mind it. And my friend texted me and she said, Amberly, I see you dancing. And I'm like, what? I had no idea that they could actually turn my camera on.
Oh,
So I was
wow.
so glad that I have pants on for this. You know what I mean? I was like, oh my gosh. But yeah, I love dancing. I love doing push-ups before I do an event. And so I was actually in my office. So from that moment, I'm always like, okay, if I'm going to be dancing around like crazy, maybe I'll put a sticky note, something over. But you know what? They were like, okay, well, this is the real deal. She really does dance like this before she goes to do a presentation.
I love it. I'm going to give you a piece of advice. My daughter went on to Amazon and bought me this little thing that sticks over your camera on your laptop, and you can slide it back and forth. So it keeps the camera covered.
I've got to get that. Yeah,
Yeah.
because that was opening for me. I was like, holy cow, that's kind of scary.
Yes. Technology. The world that we presently live in is quite scary with that sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay. What's been your biggest failure in the last year, and why do you think that happened?
My biggest failure. In the last year, I had about 5.5 years of sobriety, and it was something that was so sacred to me. And I got really busy with work
Mm-hmm.
and was letting my non-negotiables slip, like going to the gym, like skipping right into work instead of taking time in the morning to really take care of my mental health. And I had a really tough time where I had this business thing that went really wrong and somebody took my money and ran, and another situation with my brother who's in jail and all these things. And because I wasn't like doing the daily taking care of myself to build, I think we have to build our resilience before we need it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I actually slipped for one day and I lost my sobriety and had to start over counting. Thank goodness I had recovery in me that I went to bed, called my sponsor the next day, and I was like, I really messed up. And I got right back into the program. But it really was like, oh, it was so hard. And I had to look at, like, again, what did I learn from this? Like, but it really sucked. So that's probably, I guess, a failure, but I like to look at things as like, big lessons instead
Yes.
of even calling it like a failure. But I felt like a failure. You know what I mean? Like I was being so hard on myself.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
so
thank you for sharing that.
it sucked. Let me tell you, I don't recommend it. I mean, it's just, it's just anybody who's listening that has got some time under their belt. I'm lucky that I did get back, because there's a lot of people that never do.
Mm-hmm.
But it sucked having to come back as a newcomer, and oh yeah, it was hard.
Yeah, I can't imagine, but I appreciate your transparency and you sharing. Like, sometimes we share things that we feel we're embarrassed about or feel guilty about, but there's a woman listening that experienced the exact same thing, and you sharing your transparency is going to be helpful to her. So thank you.
Oh yeah, well, I hope so. I hope it is.
So last but not least, final question. What do you wish women would do more of?
Collaborate and cheer each other on.
Mm, agreed, 1000%.
Yeah, I really
1000%.
there's enough and there's an abundance of success and possibilities and opportunities, and like that is actually the reason I started my mastermind, is because I was doing all these events where I would be the only female speaker, and I'm like, we
Mm,
need more females up on stages. We need more females with podcasts. We need more women with best books. And I was like, I had all these people that were constantly asking me, like, how did you build your social media from like nothing to, 220,000 and verified? How did you get a top 1% podcast? How did you get a best-selling book? And then how do you keep getting on all these stages? And I'm like, well, you know what? I was answering people individually, like, do this, try this. This is what worked for me. Then I thought, you know what? I'm going to start a mastermind where I open up my playbook and my little black book, and I
mm,
share everything that I know with these women so they can get on stage. And then this year, I actually thought, well, I'm going to do more than that. I'm going to put them on a stage. And so in March, they are people that join the mastermind are going to get to be on stage, and it's the same stage that Ed Milet did his book launch. It's beautiful.
love
And
it.
so, yeah, just wish we had more women out there, like sharing what helps and what works for them. Because look, I'm not going to, if I do one big event for a company, they've had me speak. Why
Mhm.
not refer somebody else for that event for the
Mhm.
following time? Or you know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
I might not be like, I have a friend who she speaks on resilience. Well, people might say, well, she's your competition. I said, no, she's not.
Right. Her
She
story is
speaks,
different from yours.
her story's different. She's got a PhD in resilience. I actually freaking lived it. Like I've, living it,
Mhm.
still living it today. Mine is a totally different type of learning and what I share. And so I think that, yeah, I would say collaborating, supporting, cheering each other on, those things. I really, I hope more women come together and start doing that.
I agree 1000%. You know, I feel like I resonate with everything that you've shared today. And there's been so many times where I'm like, oh my God, me too. And, the little girl in me wanted to like tell my story that was just like your story. But I love hearing your stories. I love listening to the wisdom and the nuggets of wisdom and all the gems within your stories of how you've overcome your adversity. So I don't take your time for granted. I honestly am so grateful for your energy, for your openness and your transparency. Thank you. Thank you so much, Amberly, for taking the time to join us.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you. You are, I love your show. I love the new name of your show as well.
Thank
Even I
you.
love it. And so I can understand why you have raving, fans that love your show as well. But you're such a good interviewer. And I mean, I feel like when we first got on the call and started talking, we hit it off right away.
Yes.
And you're so amazing, and I appreciate you for having me on, and thank you for your time. I don't take it lightly that you've had me on your show to get to share with your audience, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Amberly. And to all of you legacy leavers out there, until next time, subscribe on all platforms. Don't forget to rate the show and leave us a review on Apple Podcast. And I just want to thank each and every one of you that continues to listen each week, that helped us rank globally in the top 1.5% of most popular shows. That's almost, 3 million podcasts that are active at the moment. So,
Amazing.
if you could think of, I'm going to challenge you today. If you can think of 5 women that would receive value from hearing Amberly's story, please share it with them. Feel free to, share your aha moments or what resonated with her story and screenshot this week's episode. You can tag Amberly at Amberly Lago Motivation. You can tag myself at The Real McKinney Smith, and continue to walk in greatness in a manner worthy of your calling.